Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 603, written by I Have So Questions, The 40-Mile Trick. I was driving from Wisconsin to Michigan, specifically the Upper Peninsula. It was late at night and very dark. I hit a small town with a lot of weird history. Like, unsolved mysteries came there in the 90s because of the Paulding Light. I never gave it much thought. It was just another little town I had to drive through to get home. There is one stop sign where you can go left or right. Either way, you go to two different parts of Michigan, and there is no way to wrap back around. I went right, like I always do. This was my first time driving home at night. Within a couple miles, I knew something was wrong. The road was straight when it should have been curvy, which unsettled me, but I kept going. Even though it was dark, the more I drove, the more I knew something was wrong. Nothing looked familiar, and there was a weird building far, far away that I had never seen before, along with something that was like an airplane with flashing lights suspended in the sky. I turned on the radio, and none of the stations worked. I started panicking, but I was too scared to stop. I had not seen another single car this entire time. I tried calling my dad, but I had no cell reception, no GPS to confirm where I was. I was overwhelmed with fear and I started crying. I had driven about 40 miles at this point and had not seen a single familiar landmark, just a straight road the entire time. Just as I decided to turn around and go back, I was back at the stop sign in the small town. My brain couldn't comprehend what was going on. I looked at my phone and it was suddenly working. I called my dad, sobbing, trying to explain what had happened. I turned right and had him stay on the phone with me. I recognized everything as correct this time, and even the radio stations were normal again. I made it the rest of the way with no issues. This was a decade ago, and I still remember it like it just happened yesterday. My dad and I still talk about it. It is by far the strangest thing I have ever experienced. I will never drive back home in the dark, ever again. Case notes, file number 603. Okay, so the options I see here. Perhaps you were tired, fell asleep, and hallucinated the entire 40-mile trip. However, based on your description, it seems unlikely. It would be an incredibly lucid dream state if so, and moreover, even if you had fallen asleep suddenly, you wouldn't have entered REM state or dream state instantly, unless you were somehow hypnotized. But no. When you mention lights in the sky, let's face it, this must have been an alien abduction. Almost certainly. It's been a while since I read a story where my instinct was aliens. No mention of time distortions though, but that you were whisked away back to your starting position 40 miles in an instant. Well, that does lend credence to this theory. Or maybe you were hypnotized by the aliens that abducted you and they implanted this false memory. Always wondered how their memory suppression technology must work. Is it by strong suggestion, like hypnosis works here? Does it work on everyone? There's about 20% of the population that's immune to hypnosis. So what if one of them is abducted, who they can't suppress memories of? Do they just kill those humans? Maybe that's related to some of the more mysterious missing 411 cases. Abductions gone wrong. Creepy file number 16, written by Icarus, the thin figures on our camping trip. Context: I am 30, my sons are 11 and 9. They live with their mother on weekdays, and I get them on weekends and any school holidays. When I get them on school breaks, we love to go out and spend some time in the wilderness. I love camping, and it's great for some bonding time. This happened last summer. They had recently finished school for the year, so this was late July. We decided we were going to go on an extended camping trip, a fortnight out in the wild. I knew a great place in Scotland where we could go. I had gone there with some mates not too long ago. There was a lake with clean water and shelter not too far away if the weather turned sour. We started planning our trip. My boys were very excited to be going on such a long outing. Our longest previous trip was only 5 days, so 14 days was going to be a whole new game. So, we had gathered our supplies and made our way to our new home for the next fortnight. Everything started out great. The weather was hot, and as soon as we arrived, all three of us stripped down and went skinny dipping in the lake. I know that's a little weird for a beginning, but it's a trip ritual we have, though it did feel great after being sat in the hot car for 5 hours. The first few days were perfect. We were having an amazing time. But on day 4 or 5 was when things started going strange. It began simply. We had gone to swim in the lake, and when we came back, all of our sleeping bags and blankets were gone. I walked closer to the village to try to get some reception on the little flip phone I brought to see if one of my mates who lived not too far away would be able to bring us some. That's when I saw our sleeping bags hanging from a tree. They had been tied with ropes around the hoods, as if they had been hanged with a noose. Suffice to say, this scared the crap out of me, but I assumed it was some prank done by stupid teenagers that had stumbled upon our camp. I untied them and went back to camp. I was considering going back home, but my boys were loving it out here, and I thought I was probably just overthinking things. I wish we had packed up then and left. What a mistake to stay. A couple of days passed, and by that point, I had convinced myself it was just a bad, unfunny prank. Hell, I've done dumb crap in the past that I regret, probably just something like that. At around night 8, we were treated to a new horror. It was late, maybe 1 or 2 a.m. My boys were asleep, but I felt restless and was struggling to drift off. That's when I heard a voice. It was raspy and low, like they'd been smoking for at least a decade or two. I couldn't quite make out what it was saying, but the sound sent daggers down my spine. I tried to listen carefully to make out what it was saying, but it was no good. I got every third word at best, and it wasn't making any sense. It gradually sounded as if it were getting closer, and I was still frozen in fear. It couldn't have been longer than 10 seconds, but it felt as if it were an eternity. Then it went quiet. I waited another 10 seconds or so, trying to gather the courage to get out of my tent. I did. I waved my torch around and saw nothing. After that, I climbed into my son's tent and slept with them for the night. Again, I stupidly tried to find the logical explanation. It was a bad dream, I thought. I must have been half awake and I just imagined what I had heard. There's no reason to go home just because I'm feeling a little spooked. By this point, the food we had brought was running dangerously low, so we decided that we would catch fish for our supper that evening. It was fun and I love freshly caught fish, nothing like it. We spent all day fishing, and by 5 p.m.-ish, we went back with more than enough to fill our bellies, and I started to prepare them for dinner. Gutted 1, then 2, until all but 1 remained. I sliced the last fish open, then 30, maybe more, live maggots splat on my worktop. I've never seen that before. They were newly caught, maybe an hour or 2 before at most. It was disgusting, and I should have taken it as yet another sign of what was to come. We ended up not eating the fish. I hate that we had wasted them, but none of us could look at them again after those maggots came out of one. I heated some tin soup up. We ate and then went off to bed once more. Again, I stayed up later than I should have, though maybe, looking back, that was for the best. Once more, at 1, maybe 2 a.m., I heard the voice, low and raspy, though this time I heard a second voice. It was clear that they were speaking English, or at least some of the words were English. Again, I could only understand every 4th word or so, and what they were saying wasn't making sense. Once again, the voices grew louder. They sounded like they were getting closer. I would have sworn they were maybe a meter or 2 away from the tents. When the voices didn't stop, I prepared myself mentally to protect my boys. I got up slowly, and I moved to the entrance of my tent. I stepped out with my fists out in a mock fighting pose. I would have no clue what to do in a real fight, but that doesn't mean I wasn't going to defend my kids. I waved my torch around frantically, searching for the origin of the noise, when I saw them. 2 long and thin figures at the edge of the forest, maybe 10 meters away from where I stood. They were pale, almost translucent, but also seemed to give off a faint glow. They looked up at me, with a twisted expression on their faces. They smiled at me, and then they slowly backed into the forest. The second they were out of sight, I woke up my sons, got them in the car, and we drove to the nearest motel. The next day, we went back to collect our camping equipment, and then we headed home. That wasn't the end to the camping trip that I wanted, and on the whole, I had managed to protect my boys from knowing the scary things that had been going on, though needless to say, we won't be going back to that camping spot anytime soon.